Now, I'm normally not the type of person who does impulse buys, but 3 months ago, to my surprise, that's exactly what I did. Especially, I really don't do impulse buys at all, especially when it comes to gaming, because I've come from a household that we really couldn't afford to buy new games like that. So when I would buy a game eventually, I would have done tons and tons and tons of research about it. I would have known all the ins and outs about the game before I even put it in my hands. In this case, that's not what happened. All I really knew about this game was that it was a Dark Souls game, it was open world, and that it was a very difficult and challenging game. And honestly, difficult and challenging game was really all I needed to hear. I've been wanting to play a Dark Souls game for a good little bit. They seemed pretty interesting, and I heard that they were the most challenging games on the market. And challenge is all I need to hear. When I hear challenge accepted. And in this case, I thought, this seems like the perfect time to get into the Souls franchise. And I was pleasantly surprised about how much I truly enjoyed my time in the lands between. Again, it's been about 3 months since the game came out. I've put in about 100 or so hours, and I think it's about time I give my honest and a little bit brutal opinion from someone who's never played a Soulsborne game before, all in hopes of answering a very interesting question. Is Elden Ring a good first Souls game?
Foul tarnished, in search of the Elden Ring.
Now, besides the question I posed in the intro, another big question that people have about this game is this game the hardest Soulsborne known to man? And honestly, I don't think it is. I'm gonna be honest with you, I haven't played any other Souls game, so I can only give an opinion based off like the YouTube clips I've seen from other content creators. And so from what I've seen, I would say this game is not the hardest by a long shot. And the reason why I say that is because there's a lot of ways to prepare for each and every encounter that you bring yourself into. There are so many ways to make so many builds, so many ways to make yourself overpowered, and so many ways to prepare for each and every encounter. You don't even have to fight half of the bosses that are in the game, because a lot of them are optional. And even the ones that are required, you could go around them to fight other guys first, then fight them when you're at a much higher level and doing way more damage and have way more health. You just have so many options and tools at your disposal to use to just fly through the game. Honestly, it's because of that, because of all just the things you could find just by exploring. There's so many ways that you can beat the game, so many ways that you could cheese the game. Like, if you go on YouTube, a lot of the videos you'll find are crazy items to one-shot bosses, crazy builds to melt through bosses, just things of that nature. There are so many videos of this kind, and so many build videos. What's the meta here? What's the meta there? Honestly, again, I can only speak from my experiences as an Elden Ring player, but I don't think any other Souls game has had this kind of crazy treatment. Now, probably because we're really living in the age of technology when this game is out, but at the same time, you just have a lot of ways to win, a lot of ways to play to your comfort level, and because of that, I don't think this game is necessarily the most difficult in the series. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say this game is not difficult. This game is very, very difficult, in fact, with probably some of the hardest in the franchise. But again, I don't think this game as a whole is the hardest in the franchise because you have so many ways to prepare for each and every encounter you're going to find yourself getting into. And a big and, if you find yourself not comfortable or you find yourself struggling with the current build you have and you don't like it, but you already put in so many points into certain attributes, you could always just respec. You could always just go back and change your entire build, your entire stats, and then go right back to the boss and fight like nothing ever happened. This game, because of that, I can't say it's the hardest. It's so good, I think. I think that's one of the many things this game is going for when it comes to accessibility for new players. There's a lot of trial and error here, way more than ever. And if something doesn't work, you could always change things around to make it to your liking. There's a lot of experimentation that this game really wants you to use. They give you a crap ton of items, a crap ton of spells, and a crap ton of equipment that in your first playthrough, you're not gonna know what to do with. And that's perfectly fine, because in your second playthrough, you're probably gonna have an entire build thought up just around certain items, certain weapons, and just certain like spells and stuff that you find around the world. It is incredible just how much you can really just find just by exploring. A lot of the fun stuff really about this game is just exploring. There is a story here, and the story is way more accessible, I think, than the other games, because even though the story in this game is still written on the walls, I mean, it's a Souls game, it's kind of how they do things with their story, but it's a lot more in your face. You have a lot more of a say on what's going on in the story, and what is going on in the story is it's told to you way more bluntly than in the other games. And that is honestly good. But again, the things that aren't told to you are things that you have to pick up the pieces to, which you do by just talking to NPCs, going on certain, doing certain quest lines for NPCs, and which again is another way to get some crazy items. And that's also another way that this game is just completely replayable. The world is so huge that there are a lot of things that you can easily miss. Even for me on my first playthrough, I did a lot of like YouTubing as far as like, oh, this weapon looks cool, or oh, this seems pretty cool to find this or to go do that. But even still, I found a lot of just things on my own, and I know for a fact that I didn't see everything. And so on my second playthrough, I'm seeing a lot of things that I didn't see the first time, or I'm doing certain quest lines that I didn't do the first time. And so it's a very fun game, a very, very replayable game. And I think it's one that people are really going to be playing months from now, which they have been. I mean, there's still videos coming out of people playing the game, still videos are coming out of brand new discoveries. And it's one of those games where there's so much to find and almost so little time to find everything. But again, that's really just where this game shines in its exploration. In a way, it does and it doesn't. Because as fun as the exploration is and as much as you can find while exploring, it is kind of hard to traverse the map sometimes. If you're looking at the map just by what it is and you're trying to get to point A to point B, it's not the easiest thing to do, because even though it looks simple on the map, you have to account for the tallest mountain in the world getting in your way, so you have to find another path, but then that other path is blocked, or that other path doesn't look like it's the way you can go, and so you have to go all around. It's a lot of back and forth, backtracking, and trying to find out how to get to where you're trying to go, and there's not a lot of easy ways to get places. And so that's kind of the area I didn't like as much, but I mean, it's their first time doing something like this, so they could have made it a lot worse. Honestly, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. The exploration is still fine. It's a lot better when you're just aimlessly wandering, but when you're trying to get to a specific place, sometimes it's not the easiest thing in the world to do.
Well, thou art of passing skill. Warrior blood must truly run in thy veins. Tarnished.
Now, if there was anything I was looking forward to the most when it came to playing this game, it was the boss fights. Now, open world, you know, it's nice. Exploring, yeah, it's nice. Fighting random people out in the open world, you know, PvP, it's okay. But the main course of this giant meal of a game is, of course, the boss fights. And because there's a gigantic open world to explore, there's a lot more boss fights than normal. And a lot of them are kind of repeats. Some bosses are just buffed up versions, of regular enemies that you'll eventually see later out in the world when you walk into certain other areas. And some boss fights are just, you know, 2 of those same enemies all at once, which those fights are really not fun at all, and they're not really noteworthy, and it's fine to skip them. Honestly, a lot of the fights, as I was saying earlier, are easily skippable, and some of them give pretty good rewards and some of them not that many. But the notable boss fights, like the main story boss fights or even some of the optional boss fights, are the main treat of this game. But, you know, before I get ahead of myself, I might as well talk about a little bit of the gameplay, like the controls, how the game feels to control. Honestly, the game feels really nice to control, you know, it feels nice and fluid for the most part. There are a lot of times sometimes though when I'm, for example, trying to dodge at a very specific point, but I end up just standing there, not dodging, and then once I recover from getting hit, that's when it registers that I was supposed to dodge, which by then it's too late, and then I did an accidental dodge, and then I'll end up getting hit by the next thing, and it's a whole different thing. Honestly, I thought that was like maybe a glitch on my controller, but I changed controllers before, and, you know, I used a different controller, and it, you know, still had the same issue. And I think some people also suffered from the same issue, so, you know, I don't know. I really don't know if it's like a control thing or if the game just hates me deep down. I don't know. Either way, it's a really big problem having that kind of an issue, especially when the game really requires you to be precise with your dodges. And when I try to dodge at a very precise moment in time, and I don't, then of course that just leads to rage and just shouting how unfair the system is. Though honestly, an easy fix on that might just be to dodge a few seconds before the perfect timing window is, that way the game can register it. But, you know, it's like, good luck telling yourself that in the heat of the moment. So I don't know, it's not the funnest thing in the world to feel like the game is not doing what it's supposed to be doing when all you can do is just press the roll button. If the game doesn't roll, then that's not really the player's fault, now is it? Though there are like moments like that, but for the most part, the boss fights are fine. There are a lot of them that I very much enjoy, and some of them I really don't enjoy. And some of them I just don't think are well designed. I mean, I won a lot of these fights, so I'm not just sitting here like a sore loser. Some of them I genuinely don't think are well designed. There's one boss fight in particular that I think just has a lot of artificial difficulty, which honestly I may just talk about very in depth in another video. But honestly, I think a lot of the boss fights are fine. It's just some of them are not as fun to repeat, or at least not as fun to play the way they're intended to be played. And again, I mean, that just goes to show the game how many amazing ways that you can play the game. There's not a right or wrong way to fight any of these battles. I mean, sure, there's a way the game wants you to fight some of these fights. Like, for example, in the Ronin fight, instead of using normal like Spirit Ashes summons to aid you in battle, you use just summon signs that are around the floor to summon all of the other champions that have come around the realm between to fight in the Ronin festival, because story-wise it makes sense. You know, you weren't the only person who signed up to fight this guy. There were tons of other people in the stands ready to fight, and it makes sense that we're all just gonna jump this guy. And honestly, it's the easiest way to do it, because well, not really the easiest, I mean, it's still difficult, but honestly it just makes the most sense. But again, you don't even have to do that. It's not required for you to win that way, and it's definitely possible for you not to win that way. And again, one way I played that fight was being on a horse. You don't even have to do that. So there's no right or wrong way to play the game, no right or wrong way to win these fights. I mean, heck, there are plenty of people who do a lot of these fights, you know, level 1, you know, worst class in the game, you know, hardly any equipment, maxed out, you know, things of that nature, just parries only. You'll find all sorts of stuff like that. So there's not a right or wrong way to win. But my favorite fights in these games are the ones that I walked away with learning plenty of lessons about how the game really wanted me to succeed. For example, the first boss fight in the entire game, or at least the first story mandatory boss fight, is Margit the Fell Omen, which everybody, or at least I like to call Margaret. Margaret can teach you a lot, I mean, will very much humble you and teach you a lot of different lessons about the game. when not to dodge, how to learn enemy patterns, and how to just be aggressive but not be too aggressive, to find that perfect balance. And there's another boss fight in the game that I actually really enjoyed, which was a secret optional boss deep down in a secret area somewhere. I won't, I guess, give too much away. And that boss fight kind of teaches you a lot about like delayed attacks and how to not just spam roll or to be too quick to roll, and to pay attention to what the enemy is doing visually rather than what it looks like they're doing or what it feels like might be the best time to attack, which these lessons translate to every other boss fight in the game. I like that in this game there are a lot of situations that you'll be getting into that translate into other fights of the game that'll make you a better player after defeating them. And going into your second and third playthrough, you kind of just know how to conquer them. Like, you'll be stuck on a lot of these fights for plenty of time, maybe even hours like I was. I fought Margaret for a good few hours. I was stuck on him for maybe like a few days. And once I encountered him like the second or third time, I just kind of knew his patterns. I knew what to look out for, and I felt very confident. And I just enjoyed the encounter. It was just fun because it just felt right. It felt like everything I had learned up until that point was being tested in the right kind of way. Not an unfair way, not in a there's no real way I could possibly win this type of way, but in a way that made me feel like I was actually getting better at the game. Made me feel like I was learning. And honestly, just the fights are just amazing spectacles. Some are just really out of the top and out of nowhere, while some are just, again, just really, really fun, while others are just straight up difficult. I mean, they're all difficult, but I mean, I don't know. It's an amazing game. I love the fights. And again, the gameplay, when it's at its best, when the controls are, everything are working, everything just feels like it's flowing like a nice, well-timed dance. Everything just is so much fun. It's so much fun to fight some of these bosses. It's so much fun to repeat some of these encounters, especially when you go from one playthrough to the next and fight them in completely different ways than you did last time with the same kind of mindset, you know, learning what you've learned from those fights and taking that into the next encounter. It's just a lot. It's a lot to learn, and it's a lot to play around with, and so much replayability that just keeps you wanting to come back. Even the boss fights that I thought were like, I really didn't like this, after winning, it's like, you know, I can kind of do that again, you know? It's like, well, you know, what's another time? I beat him once, I can beat him again. So, yeah, it's just a lot of fun to fight these encounters because they are just incredible when they're at their best. But when they're not, it can be tough to get through it, you know? I have a controller that's not sitting in the best of places now. It's in the, you know, gaming closet in the sky now. Because when the bosses are just not great, they're not great. And when the encounters just feel very, very not fun, they're just not fun. Because for example, there is, I don't know if it's right to call it a mechanic, but if you get hit by an attack, your character will just stay staggered for a good hot second. And you won't be able to roll, attack, or anything until that hot second is over. And so when you fight an enemy just out in the open world, for example, like one of the dogs that are just out there, they can just hit you and hit you and hit you and hit you, and you won't be able to really move, especially when there's multiple of them. And that's also another problem when you're out in the open world. There are a lot of enemies that will be out in groups, and I don't think this game was meant for you to fight multiple enemies at the same time. There are weapons that make those kind of encounters easier, but I don't think you were actually meant to really fight them or really be well equipped to fight them, because again, if you get hit once, somebody else can hit you again and keep hitting you. Like, you just won't be able to function. And it's really weird because, you know, just thinking about it as a person, it's like, oh, if I get punched, I'll be shocked, but like, I can still move. I'm not unable to move just because I got hit. And it makes sense if it were like a bigger hit, for like the huge swings, if you get knocked on your butt, that makes sense. But just for every single attack, I just stay staggered for a hot second. It's really, really, really irritating, especially when you'll have a delayed input because of that, and you'll end up making a mistake that didn't feel like it was caused because of you, but more so because the game is just not being on your side. And I don't know, it's just not the funnest and it just doesn't feel fair to have that kind of a mechanic implemented into games. Now, that could just be a Dark Souls staple type of thing, but I still don't like it. I'm very much not a fan of it. I mean, again, it's one thing to punish the player, but it's another thing to really make them just not able to succeed unless they have a perfect run. And that's just, that rubbed me the wrong way. Rubbed me the wrong way a lot. But for the most part, the gameplay is fine, besides little issues like the rolling, like getting staggered. The gameplay is really fine. Again, when it's at its best, it's just so much fun to play, and it's so much fun to master. Learning what all your attacks do, learning what all the Ashes of War do and spells, and how you can just mix and match those to make some crazy out of the box build. It's really, really cool. I think the game is really fun when it comes to its combat and how you can just tackle each and every boss, and how the New Game Plus works. Because in every New Game Plus, the enemies get a lot tougher. They take a lot more hits to go down, and they do a lot more damage. Now, I don't know the exact multipliers on all that, but apparently New Game Plus 7, once you've beaten the game, once you've gone to your 7th run playthrough, that's the hardest that the game is gonna get, apparently. I mean, I'm only like about to beat my 2nd playthrough, so I don't really know how tough that's gonna be, but that's interesting that that's how the game works. And again, it only helps with the replayability. And it also is nice that you don't have to pretty much like reset from the very beginning with 0 items, 0 weapons, and all that each and every time you want to replay the game. Nor does it get easier every time you replay the game. I mean, in the sense that the enemies are just completely pushovers, you know. And so I think that's great. I think it's really, really great. Again, I think this game is a good old happy fun time, but when it's not for the wrong reasons. I feel like sometimes the difficulty feels very artificial. Because of things like getting stunned, because of things like the rolling sometimes not working, or just how some of the boss fights are designed, or just the fact that some boss fights are just you're fighting 2 of the same enemy, or just 2 enemies at the same time with a giant health pool. It's just not fun. It's not fun. Again, like I just don't feel like this game was designed with you fighting 2 people at the same time in mind. Now, if you use like a spirit summon, or even just be in the multiplayer, that makes sense. But like you one-on-oneing 2 enemies at once, 2 boss enemies even at once, it's just not that fun. Now, I can't really comment on the multiplayer as much. I played like a little bit PvP just for the sake of doing this quest line. But other than that, I didn't really mess with it. This game for me was more like a game I wanted to beat by myself on my own, and since I might dive into the multiplayer just to see what it's like, but I don't know. I can't really comment on that part too much. All I really know is that the health pools are increased on, I think, bosses and maybe also enemies when you're in multiplayer, but other than that, I believe it's the same experience, just with friends to share in your suffering. So yeah, gameplay wise, this game is a solid 7 out of 10 for gameplay, but I mean, it could it's not game breaking, honestly. The issues that I have are not game breaking. They're just little nitpicks that I feel like could have easily just not have been there. But I don't know, it could also just be me. But either way, the game is a fun time when it's at its best.
The fallen leaves tell a story of how a tarnished became Elden Lord.
Elden Ring, despite its few little bit of flaws, is still honestly a very great contender for Game of the Year. Honestly, a lot of people honestly think this game will be Game of the Year. And the only reason why I'm not in that boat is just because the year is not over yet, and we still have a few games coming out that could very much take the title. But honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if this game won Game of the Year. I think it's a very great game, a very awesome replayable game, and a game that is still being updated for free. There's not a season pass, there's nothing, but they're still adding like quest lines to the game. They're still doing like balance adjustments for the game, still fixing bugs in the game, because there are bugs. The game's not perfect, but it's still great. I think the game is still very fun to play. Even despite having like super frustrating moments, I still enjoy my time with it. I still want to come back to play it, and I still want to be better at playing it. I think the game is really fantastic. And again, to answer the question from the beginning of the video, is this game a good first Souls game? I would say yes. I think this game is the Dark Souls equivalent of Persona 5. For those who don't know, the Persona franchise has been around for a good long while, and it's a rather old JRPG type of game. And the 5th installment came out on the PlayStation 4 about I think like 10 plus years now, and I feel old just thinking about it. But anyway, on the topic of that game was the most recent in the franchise, and it had, updated graphics. The battle system was the most refined it had ever been, and becoming overpowered and making great strides in that game was the easiest it had ever been. And it was so user friendly and putting so much power in the hands of the player that it was so easy to pick up and so much fun to master. Not easy, but so much fun once you got the hang of it. And I think Elden Ring is that equivalent for the Souls franchise. It's the gateway game, I think. It'll definitely be a lot harder going backwards. I mean, even if you play like the Demon Souls remake on the PS5, it's still gonna be hard going back in general. Because I'm not gonna say that far back, because the game's only like maybe like a few months old, or maybe a year at this point. But still, just going back from Elden Ring is not easy. But I think this game will very much open the floodgates to people wondering, well, what other From Software games are out there? Or what other Dark Souls-like games would I possibly be interested in? And it also makes us wonder, what more can we expect coming from Elden Ring? Because I don't think the updates are done. I think we're still going to see a lot more content, and some people have speculations, some people have possibly even seen leaks, and I don't know. I don't know what there is or isn't going to be, but I'm excited to see what the developers do for this game and what the future of it holds. And I'm honestly curious to see what other kind of games From Software really has made, as far as me playing it with my own hands and seeing it with my own eyes. And so, I'm very looking forward to the future of From Software, because this may be their most recent magnum opus, but I don't think this is the end from them. And so, in conclusion, I think Elden Ring is a very solid 8.5, possibly a 9 out of 10. Again, the little flaws are just minor nitpicks and sometimes experience breaking, but for the most part, I still very much enjoy playing Elden Ring. And I hope to possibly see some of you guys in the lands between if I do eventually do some multiplayer or PvP stuff. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Elden Ring, and I do believe it is a very great game and a very great first Souls game. If you have made it to this part of the video, I definitely just want to give a big thank you to you for getting this far and for watching the whole thing straight through. Honestly, this is gonna be the first of my Elden Ring analysis type of videos. The next few videos I want to make are more specifically going to be about like the bosses, the bosses that I feel were really great, and some that I felt were not bad per se, but just not that great, and to go into more details about each particular fight, because there were a few that stood out to me for good and bad reasons, and I want to talk about those more in depth. But yeah, this is like the first of a few Elden Ring videos, and the first video really I have on this channel, and so I really want to just thank you for being a part of this journey, and hopefully you'll stick with it for just a little bit. But hey, again, even if this is the only video you watch, I thank you so much for being here. And yeah, because man, this video took so long to make, from getting footage to putting all the footage in together in this nice little package. Just took a lot. It took a lot. But yeah, hopefully you'll be around for the next few videos later on in the future. But if not, thank you for coming. And hopefully I will see you in the next video. Take care and God bless.